Hello, church. It's Pastor Steve with our Monday Minute Unscripted for January 17th of 2021. We all hope that you had a safe weekend. We had a great winter retreat at the Lake Huron Retreat Center this past weekend with our adults that we have done every year, first time since we had with COVID, and I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. I do want to remind everyone that our big event that is coming up in addition to our regular weekly events is our Modified Homeless Hospitality Week. That's going to be starting the week of February 5th through February 12th. There's information that you can find that both came out through email and can be found on our website through newburghumc.org/events. And you can scroll down to the Homeless Hospitality Week, and that will take you to a link where you can find all of the information you need in terms of what we are collecting for items at the church to be distributed, making of meals, and trips down to CAST. We will not be housing anybody at the church this year due to COVID protocols. So check that out and all of the other events that are happening in the life of our church at our webpage. Today is MLK Day. And as we take an opportunity to celebrate the life of Dr. King and his legacy, which is always one that we should be examining and looking at as a guidepost for us for our future. As I started to do that myself, I reflected back to our winter retreat this past weekend, where we had initially titled it the Finding Comfort in the Letters of Paul. And looking for the comforting passages that Paul gives to the various churches that he writes to in the New Testament that can bring us comfort, especially during a time of pandemic. One of the things Dr. Dunbar and I found throughout the weekend is that while it didn't go exactly the way that we had thought it would go, there were so many other better possibilities that came out of it than we could have even imagined. And we could see how the threads were being put together for our circumstances now, even as we are also looking towards a hope-filled future. And it gives us comfort, it gives us hope, but it also gives us a challenge as we look to be the church in the future. That's part of what Dr. King was trying to do, was to envision a hope-filled future. And many of the passages that I taught on this weekend, from the book of Romans to 1 Corinthians 13 to Philippians 2, all really seem to come together in showing the parallels of what Paul's life was like when he was establishing the church and what Dr. King was doing through his role not only as a pastor, but as I would say also as a prophet, to bring reform and to bring race relations into full focus here in this country, and so that we could all attain equality. When you look at Paul's letter to the Romans, in the 8th chapter, at the end of the 8th chapter, Paul said that no one is in a position to condemn. It's God who justifies, and God is the one who intercedes for us. He even goes on to quote the scripture from the Psalm and says, "For your sake we are being killed all day long. We're accounted as sheep to be slaughtered, but in all of these things we are more than conquerors because of the love of God." Nothing, hardships, famine, beatings, imprisonments, can ever separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. How many times did Dr. King and those who were marching with him in the civil rights movement endure hardships, suffering, beatings, imprisonments, all for the sake of bringing that message of hope, of equality for all people? And what I found is the overall common thread in all of these things is the gift of love. We studied 1 Corinthians 13, which says that love is patient, love is kind, not arrogant, boastful, or rude, doesn't rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. We could be as righteous as we want to be, but if we do not have love that is undergirding all of that, As Paul says, we're nothing more than a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Now, we often talk about that passage as the greatest of these is love, which is true. But right in the end of the verse in chapter 12, Paul says, I will still show you a more excellent way. And that's what love is, a more excellent way. Dr. King modeled that, and as he was famously quoted as saying, that darkness cannot stamp out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot stamp out hate. Only love can do that. And when we love ourselves as we love our neighbors, then we can achieve many great things. And one of those things is to put others before ourselves, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, to not think of yourself more highly than another person, and in fact, to think of them as better than you. I think in this day and age, as we continue to struggle with fulfilling Dr. King's dream, as the Black Lives Matter movement has gained traction over the last couple years, it's also gained its detractors, especially for those who feel that their power is threatened, just like those who felt their power was threatened back in Dr. King's day. It's something we, as followers of Jesus, need to continue to keep in mind, that we must continue to push forward for equality. We must stand up and listen to the ways, while we do not have overt laws that are purporting segregation, we are doing these type of things in our society in more subtle ways. And that, in some ways, can be even more dangerous if we don't have the love of Christ guiding us all the way through. So on this Martin Luther King Day, I would encourage you to focus on the ways that you can help, but not out of anger or bitterness or resentment, but modeling Dr. King's path of nonviolence and continuing to work to see that his dream is fulfilled by sharing the love and the light that we know in Jesus Christ. Have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here next week for another edition of the Monday Minute.